Good morning and welcome to Chapter 12 of Child Psychology. In the last chapter, we started this unit. We started talking about school-age children and children's development and their psychology in the school years. Again, remember, we're not necessarily talking about preschool here. We're talking about school. There is a difference there, a real concerted effort to institutionalize children, to teach them how to be citizens, to get you to sit still and pay attention and obey the rules, learn how to be a part of something larger than yourself, that learning is not about you alone, but about other people, and all kinds of different lessons that we learn in elementary school. So today I just wanted to touch on some things about cognitive development in these years. So there's a lot in this chapter. There's a lot in chapter 12 that you're going to consider as far as what is going on now that we have brain development. What is going on in mind development? Starting again, like we always start with cognitive development, we start with a stage theory. So in this stage theory, Piaget's stage theory of cognitive development, we've gone from the stage of pre-operational thinking to what we'll call concrete operational thinking. This is where we would fully expect children to be able to represent what they're learning in their minds. This would be a problem if you could not do that. If you had to see everything and touch everything in order to believe it existed or to be able to think about it, that would be a problem. You carry your brain around wherever you go, but you cannot carry everything in the world around with you. You can carry it all in here, and that's why mental operations are important. These we'll call concrete because it's all based on things that we can see and touch and hear. So if you were teaching children, like I remember when I was in elementary school, we learned about Australia. Okay, I've never been to Australia. I do believe it exists. It's there somewhere on the other side of the world. But I know something about Australia because we learned about it in school. We didn't go to Australia. I've never touched a kangaroo, not that I remember, but I've seen pictures of them. I've seen how they compare to dogs and cats, which I have seen. So this is concrete operational. I've eaten Australian food, Vegemite, other kinds of things like that. I've eaten food before, so in the comparison I can learn about Australian food, see. So that is what I call concrete operational thinking. Consequently, we really value this Piagetian way of learning, where we have opportunities to interact with our world environment and thus learn and develop and change our thinking to adjust to that, to adapt to that. So for this reason, good elementary schools are those that are like this, constructivist, where children are given opportunities to do projects, to interact, to look at things on their own in order to learn about them. So schools that facilitate this, that allow this and encourage this kind of approach to learning, of human interaction with what we're learning, this is really where we would say this is a good school. In schools where children are not, they're just kind of passive to sit there at a desk and somebody hand them everything, like injecting them with a hypodermic needle with knowledge or whatever. Schools like that we tend not to think that they're very good. Something else, let's see, that we would look for children in this age to learn. First of all, they're developing memory. I think if you were to think back, and I encourage you to think back as you're reading this chapter. Think back what it was like in elementary school. Take a trip down memory lane, because memory is one of the most essential cognitive abilities that we really learn or develop at this age. In school, the teachers often give you something that you have to memorize. They may teach you some really cool ways of remembering like that, because repeating something over and over to yourself is not a very good way to remember it. So there are different cool mnemonic devices to use. I still, to this day, now that was 40 years ago, remember the order of operations in algebra, because I'll always remember, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. I did have a child, it's funny, argue with me. That's wrong. It's please excuse my dear Aunt Susie. And he actually did not think he could learn the order of operations if I said Sally. So anyway, that's an adventure in missing the point, I believe. Something else that we want children to be able to learn at this age or develop at this age is critical thinking. We are surrounded by knowledge and information. We're surrounded by attitudes and opinions and all kinds of stuff like this. We have our own beliefs. And so it is important to understand the roots of these beliefs, the credibility of knowledge, in order to get it, to appreciate it, and to believe what's real. Too many people do believe it's wrong to think something that isn't scientifically provable. And that's not true. We all have our beliefs, and so what we'll have to do is distinguish between scientific fact and opinion. And something isn't necessarily a scientific fact because some big person with a degree told you to believe that. There is a process, a scientific process of understanding. Something else is metacognition. So you're thinking, but you're also thinking about your thinking. You appreciate what you're doing when you think. You appreciate what is going on there. How do you remember it? How do you process it? How do you pay attention to it? And so those kinds of skills are called metacognition. Meta meaning it's reflective. Cognition is thinking about thinking. When you have to study for a quiz, you're using metacognition. How is it that I can remember this information, and then how can I process it in a way to understand if a question does not come exactly the same way as I study it? Can I still answer the question? Yeah, you can if you use that metacognition. Also, to understand all of these mental processes that I've just talked about, this is going to take us to a place where we're going to start to compare children and try to understand which ones are getting it and which ones are not getting it. And if they're not getting it, how can we help them get it? Last chapter I talked about, I think I remember talking about learning disabilities and different kinds of learning disabilities, or at least encouraging them to learn about those. And so with cognitive development, we're going to see some of these learning disabilities, but we're not putting our fingers on biological reasons. We're looking for thinking and how can we help children to learn how to think. And this leads us to have to assess whether they're getting it, how they're getting it. Back in the day, they used to use IQ tests. IQ tests are not tests to teach, to test or to assess what you've already learned. More IQ tests are to see what you can do with what you already have. They're based on a certain idea of intelligence. Other ideas of intelligence might be more practical as far as what can you do in certain different contexts. Reading, math, and taking care of plants and animals and music and all that. And that's based on a theory called multiple intelligences by a Harvard psychologist. I think he was a Harvard psychologist. I think he's still at Harvard. He was at Harvard. But his name is Howard Gardner. Robert Sternberg's ideas of triarchic intelligence, three real specific ways of thinking about anything. We can do all three, but each of us might do one better than the other two. And that's okay. So in teaching, we really want to appreciate a lot of different ways of thinking at something, thinking about something. This is called constructivist because we want to see that the way each of us really understands something is that it makes sense to us, that we have processed it and we've learned it. A lot of what we'll read in this chapter has to do with that. How do we process it? Okay, I'll mention some other things that your chapter mentions that I think are important. And sometimes we forget these things because we just think, you get it if you're smart, you don't get it if you're not smart, and all we have to do is figure out who's smart, who's not. There's a lot more to it than that. For example, we have motivation. You don't learn if you're not motivated. Those of us in educational psychology understand that children have to be motivated to learn, which means you have to understand what's the difference between motivation based on grades and motivation based on, don't you want to know this? I want to know a lot of things. You don't have to give me money in order to get me to learn it, because I want to learn it. I want to understand it. I want to know. So consequently, it is better for children to grow up with that kind of intrinsic motivation where they want to be the best people they can be. They want to understand things. That extrinsic stuff, grades and money and all that kind of stuff, runs out. You can't always have it, nor does it really motivate very well. This also leads us to a word called mindset, which is how do you approach what you're learning? If your mindset is for grades, your mindset is based on pleasing someone else. You can't always do stuff based on pleasing other people. You are the one you have to live with, so you need a mindset that you would please yourself, which means you can't always look to other people to give you that feedback and appreciation or approval or whatever. So get out of that achievement mindset and go into a mastery mindset where you know whether you really are good at something and you've mastered it. You master the stuff that you enjoy. Okay? The next part of that, the next step, is to develop something called self-efficacy. We talk about self-esteem a lot. That's, aren't I a good person? But self-efficacy is not only do I see myself as a valuable person, but I see myself as able. Okay? So I'm doing this video because I believe I'm able to do it. I teach psychology because I believe I'm able to do it. So that's important for children to develop, is that self-efficacy. Toward that end, we want to learn how to set goals for ourselves, realistic goals, to believe that we can achieve them, and then to make a plan to do that, to be able to deal with the times that we make a mistake or mess up or fail or really do it on purpose, and to be able to kind of pull ourselves up and believe that we can still achieve and that we can still master things. Okay, so there's a lot to this chapter. I know I'm going on and on and on, but I want to encourage you to put this in the context of your own memories of learning. And have a great week and take care of yourselves. And I'll see you for chapter 13 next.